Hi, welcome to lesson 2 of my Kotlin JavaScript tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to work with the DOM from our Kotlin JavaScript application. If you recall, our last time we worked on this, we left off with a Hello World application consisting of two files, main.kt, which is right there, which just prints something to the console, and also our index.html. Index.html is importing the Kotlin standard library compiled to JavaScript, and it's also importing our code converted to JavaScript. So let's build on that now, and let's write some code that interacts with the DOM. Before we interact with the DOM, we have to have some kind of hook for doing so. So let's go to our index.html file. Let's create a div. We'll create an ID of root. So we have this div with an ID of root, and the sole purpose of this div is so that we can programmatically hook into it and insert stuff in the inner HTML area there. So we should be able to now grab that with document.getElement by ID. So I'm going to say doc enter .get element by ID root. So you'll notice I got auto completion and I get type checking. Also notice that Kotlin has an object up here called kotlin.browser.document. So what they do is under this kotlin.browser object, they provide type libraries for the entire DOM API. So now that we have this get element by ID, let's assign it to a variable called root. Whoops. So that represents the div element. So now let's go ahead and assign an inner HTML. Notice the auto completion. Inner HTML equals h1 hello closing h1. And that's pretty much it, except for the compiler is balking at us a little bit. It's telling us that we're doing something that's not null safe. So one of the features of Kotlin is that it is not only type safe, it's also null safe. So what it's telling us is that get element by ID might return a null. So in other words, root could be null. And anytime you say null dot something, that could cause a problem. So the compiler is forcing us to address it. There's a number of things we could do. For one, I could say if root equals null, throw null pointer exception. There's not much we can do here because this is kind of a fatal error if we don't have this. So throwing in exception is an appropriate response. Now this is the old school way of doing this. Now it's given us some little errors here, some little, not errors, but suggestions. So replace if with the Elvis operator. So let's do that. I'm going to do the light bulb by saying Alt-Enter and IntelliJ. Replace if with Elvis operator. And it gave us an equivalent syntax. So that's the Elvis operator. What this basically means is, if this is null, return it. Otherwise, return this. Now in this case, we're not really returning something. While throw does return an expression in Kotlin, we're really throwing an exception, which will stop the execution. So that's what we're doing there. There's a third way we could do this as well. And that is in the actual place you go to invoke it. So if I go and say bang bang, that's basically saying if this is null, if root is null, throw a null pointer exception. Otherwise, go ahead and do what you're going to do, which in this case is accessing the inner HTML variable. So this is probably the most terse way of what we're doing. So in this particular case, there's nothing we can really do to handle if root is null, nothing really logical, and throwing in exception is probably as good as any. All right, so now that's it. So it's kind of a little sidetrack into some Kotlin stuff, but that is the whole point, is that we have the type safety and null safety of Kotlin in our HTML programming. So let's compile this and see what we get. I'll hit refresh, and voila, there's our hello. If I go look at the Elements tab, which is our runtime DOM tree, you can see there's our div, and in it there's our h1. So everything is working as planned. Let's make our HTML a little bit more complicated this time. So I'm going to make a special variable for our HTML. I'm going to say val HTML equals, and I'm going to use the multi-line string capabilities of Kotlin, like so. And in there, I'm going to say, I'll move in our HTML, and I'll put some more HTML. Say P 47 P. Now let's say 47 was coming from a variable. If you've done any HTML programming, you know that templates are a huge thing. For more complex application, you could use something like Angular or React to handle your templating needs or templating-like needs. But for simple applications like this, using a multi-line string is pretty convenient, especially since you have lightweight templating capabilities built in. For example, if I want to make a variable here, say val x equals 10, I could actually use that guy, like so, to do my templating. Let's see if that works for us. So instead of this string, I'm going to use my HTML template, like that. Good? All right. Let's run this sucker, see how it looks. Sometimes you can put this over here for symmetry. All right, so I'm going to compile, refresh, and there's our 10. So we have a lightweight templating solution. There are lots of JavaScript apps that will work perfectly well without a heavyweight framework like Angular or React, and having this lightweight templating is a nice little solution for those types of situations. All right, moving on, let's create a button. I'm going to say button, click me, and I'll give an ID so we can hook into it. Call it B1. And hook into it, I'll just use my get element by ID again. Say val B1. And then I'll say B1.add event listener. And I want to listen for the click event. And this is where Kotlin is really handy. I can hand it a inline function like so. So I'll say, let's see, println clicked. I'm having the same issue with B1, so I'll put my bang bang in there to tell the compiler I know that that could be null, and a null pointer exception is an appropriate way to handle it. All right, that is that. Let's see what happens now. So we have our button. We have grabbed the button programmatically, and we have added an event listener to it. And our event listener is in the form of a Kotlin Lambda function. So we build. Let's go back and run it. Refresh. Go to our console. All right, if we see it, there should be the word clicked right down here. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right. So there you have it, an introduction to interacting with a DOM from Kotlin JavaScript. Signing out till next time.